Hello everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and you of course are listening to the Property Podcast. It's that time of year where we give you our ultimate resources of 2020, and we've got loads for you. We've got books, podcasts, TV shows, YouTube videos, and a load of tech. We're giving you our top list on all of that for 2020.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday property investors come to be informed and inspired. This week, an episode that we do every single year has nothing to do with property, but I consistently get people bringing up to me throughout the year. People are always saying, I listened to your best of episode and I really enjoyed this. So it's something people seem to enjoy. It's something we always enjoy because we pick up recommendations from each other. So hopefully you will too. Let's get on with it.
Giving you a list of our top resources each and every year is definitely one of our favourite things to do. And what's lovely, even though it has nothing to do with property, or very little, it seems to be one of the most popular episodes with you guys. So that's awesome, a win-win here. It's a great episode when you've got a bit of downtime over Christmas and you're looking for a few more YouTube videos to watch or an extra podcast to download and listen to. And if you're a bit late with Christmas shopping, there's a few ideas here for Christmas presents as well. So we've got loads to whiz through here. We're going to start off with books. And Rob, it's been an interesting time for books, as we were discussing before we turned the mics on, that actually putting time aside to read has been a challenge for both of us. And when I have picked up books this year, I've been a bit unlucky, so I'm hoping you've done better, because I can only pick out two that I'd strongly endorse this year, when normally I have to cut down my list to try and just make it a top three.
Yeah, I've struggled as well. In my case, it's just that I haven't read as much. I've really struggled with the focus and the attention span. Don't know why, but I have read a few this year that are strong recommendations. The first is the one that I called as my book of the year, right back towards the start of the year, because I knew it couldn't be beaten. It's so good. It's called A Bit of a Stretch. It's by Chris Atkins. He's a filmmaker who got sent to prison for 5 years for tax fraud, and the book is effectively his diaries of his time inside. I strongly advise listening to the audiobook because he reads it and he's got a really nice way of doing it. It's so funny, it's so interesting, and it's so sad. And really, I'd never given prisons and the justice system a lot of thought before, but it's such an important topic and one I'm really glad I now know more about.
I noticed that Rob has half a comb sticking out of his hair, and I'm unsure if this is a fashion statement or a potential weapon. "What do you know about quantum mechanics?" he demands. "Quite a bit, as it happens," I say. "I actually studied physics at Oxford, and it was the only part I found interesting." We spend the next 10 minutes discussing wave-particle duality. "I'm seriously impressed with your knowledge," I say warmly, congratulating myself on building up such a strong rapport. He nods and leans in conspiratorially. Assuming that he's finally going to open up about his inner turmoil, I lean in too. Instead, he grins like the Grim Reaper and says, "Sing me a song, or I'll slit your throat."
Next up on the list is a book that we both really enjoyed this year, and it's called What It Takes by Stephen Schwarzman. We enjoyed this book so much, we actually podcasted on the book because we thought there were so many lessons that everyone can take away. But listening to this podcast is good, but actually reading or listening to this book is better. It's a real insight to someone who's achieved incredible things. You know, that's why for me books like this are so special, because you can't go and have a chat with these people unless you're very, very lucky. So the next best thing is to read their books and understand what they did and what they implemented to achieve those levels of success. And that this book is great for that, and it's also very enjoyable to read as well. So while I've not had many books this year I'd strongly endorse, this is certainly one of them.
The rain soaked through my jacket and shirt straight to my skin. My clothes were hanging off me like rags, the water streaming into my eyes and down my face. Every time I thought I finally had a taxi, someone else grabbed it before me. Desperate and drenched, I spotted a cab sitting at a red light and ran over to it. I banged on the back window and held up a limp $20 bill.
Next on my list was The Biggest Bluff by Maria Konnikova. Now, in theory, this was my dream book because it's a book about poker, which I've continued to be really interested in this year and play quite a bit of. But it's using poker as a tool to talk about the psychology of decision-making, which I'm also really interested in. So it should have been great, and it was. And it's all wrapped up in a really great story of the author going from never having played poker before and going on a year-long journey to try and become a professional poker player. You don't need to know anything about poker at all to get a lot out of this book. You can just approach it as a great story with some interesting lessons in there. But if you are interested in poker, then it's a must-read.
For professional poker players and amateurs alike, this is the career pinnacle. If you can win the main event, you have guaranteed yourself a place in poker history. Sit down with the best and have a chance at the most prestigious, richest prize in the poker world. Some people in the room have been saving for years to take their one shot.
Next up is How I Built This by Guy Raz. Now, if you're thinking that sounds familiar, you're probably right to think that, because it's a podcast, and it's a podcast that does very well in the charts. Based around that podcast, taking some of the very best interviews that he's had, and he's had a lot of brilliant interviews with some brilliant people, and put them into a format that is really digestible. I was hesitant to give this book a go because I've listened to the podcast and I thought, what else can I take from it? But it's like a highlight reel of that podcast. And in fact, it's done such a good job that I don't know if I'll carry on listening to the podcast, because the book delivers. It's really pleasant to listen to. It's not one of those books that you've got to work hard to get into. I consume the audiobook, so Guy's obviously a pro and makes it very easy to listen to. So I highly recommend that. If you've got any interest in business, which I know a lot of property investors have, check out How I Built This by Guy Raz.
They travel all over Alabama pitching to anyone who will listen to them, trying desperately to raise the money. They get nowhere until the very last day, day 30 of 30, when a man named Erlen McWhorter, who made his money building Lowe's home improvement stores, calls them up after attending their pitch meeting at the Auburn Chamber of Commerce. And he tells them that he believes in them, that he loves their chicken salad, and that he will write them a check for every penny they need.
And the last book on my list is Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. No relation. Different spelling, actually. But Matthew is a competitive storyteller. Yes, I didn't know such a thing existed either, but apparently they do. Story slams. And the book is about how you can become a better storyteller, which is great for social situations. No one wants to be the person droning on while everyone else's eyes glaze over. But more than that, it's about recognizing the stories in your own life and the little moments each day that are really special, but unless you're keeping an eye out for them, they can just completely pass you by. And it's got some really simple exercises in there that I've been doing for the last 6 months or so since I read the book, and it really has made me look at certain things a different way. As you'd expect, because he's a storyteller, it's a really engaging and easy to read book. So it might not be the kind of thing you'd normally pick up, but I'd strongly recommend giving it a chance.
A couple years ago, a woman asked Alicia why she first fell in love with me. Fortunately, I was standing right beside her when the question was asked. I waited for Alicia to say something about my rugged good looks, quick wit, or enchanting eyes. I thought it was this situation, I said, motioning up and down my body. It's never been this situation, Alicia informed me. Instead, she told the woman that it was storytelling that first made her fall for me.
So that's books, and while we both may have struggled putting together our books list, although we are pretty happy with our top choices, what's never a challenge is listing podcasts. And in fact, actually, it's a real struggle to pick our top list, but we've done it. And the first one on my list is called Meditative Stories. For me, this podcast is a beautiful podcast. It's so well put together. I've recommended this on our Hub Extra previously. And for me, when the year has been at its toughest, this podcast has helped dig myself out from, what at some points has been a pretty dark place. For all of us this year, to pretend that it's been a year of highs is ridiculous. At certain points throughout this year, I've been overwhelmed. I'm happy to say that I've been happy most of the year. And the positive person that you hear on the podcast is how I default to most of the time. But sometimes it's tough. And this year really challenged us all. So what this podcast does is it takes you on a meditative story. It's a combination of a story, music, and mindful prompts, which really help you just zone out and really just become quite reflective and present. And I found these best to listen to on a walk. When I've left the house in kind of a real poor mental state, and I've gone for a walk and listened to this podcast, without fail, I've come back in a far better place. So for me, this is much more than a podcast. It's a tool that I found incredibly useful, and I'd highly, highly recommend it. Even if you're in a great place right now, and I really hope you are, to have this in your locker to listen to at any point is great. And actually, I've even started playing them back to my son in the car when I take him to football, because some of those lessons in there are brilliant, and the way it's put together is just, as I've said, beautiful.
I wake up before the sound of my alarm. to my phone ringing. I'm in Vancouver for work, alone in my hotel room. I hear the morning's first birds. The sound is distinct but softened by the white noise of the hotel's air conditioning. Daylight is just beginning to push its way in, seeping through the cracks of the curtains.
Well, my first podcast recommendation can't claim to be as potentially useful or therapeutic as Rob's, but it is really interesting. And this is probably the podcast I've listened to the most regularly this year. It's called My First Million. And there are some episodes where they interview guests, but the best episodes were the one where it's just the two co-hosts chatting about business ideas. They're both American entrepreneurs and they're both idea machines. And it's so interesting just to hear entrepreneurs riffing between themselves about a new idea they've had and how they might approach it. And one of them will just say, oh yes, I was learning about this thing. And then the other one will go, oh, well, if I was starting that business, I'd do blah, 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 blah. And it's all stuff that I never would have thought of. So the episodes are a bit all over the place, but I kind of like that. And I always come away from it having learned something I didn't know before.
Like I tweeted out on September 1st, Dear Internet, I'm going to raise $1 million rolling fund only from Twitter buddies and internet strangers, not taking any money from real life friends. I'm trying to go from 0 to 1 million in 21 days. And I said, and look at this, like within 5 days, we crossed 1 million, and within 21 days, we crossed 2.5 million. And then we shut it down. We stopped taking money in. And I was like, there's a good story there. You should tell it.
Next up is a mini podcast series. So last year we loved Crypto Queen and we recommended that on our top list. And actually there's been an update this year, so make sure you check that out. But another mini series that I've really enjoyed this year is called We Crashed. And it's the story behind the rise and what looks like the fall of WeWork. WeWork is an office space business and it's in a way, a real estate business. So it's quite relevant to everyone listening to this podcast. I think everyone will enjoy it. But the storytelling is fantastic. The editing is fantastic. It's high production value. It must take them forever to put together, which is probably why it is a mini-series. But it's really enjoyable. The founder is quite a character. I'll leave it at that, but go and listen to it. I am sure you will enjoy this pod.
I remember thinking, all right, I'm about to be on a ride.
Why is this a better idea for millennials than working at home or finding an office?
We like to say this is for the we generation. It's not limited by age or gender.
He said that they were elevating the consciousness of people on the planet.
It was $1 billion idea.
The co-working giant WeWork is amongst the most valuable startups in the world.
Downtown Vancouver today.
We work here in Shenzhen.
WeWork खुला है मुंबई के.
I say we, you say work, we work.
Who does this?
Another podcast I've listened to a lot this year is Modern Wisdom, and it's just an interview-style podcast. There are hundreds, thousands of interview-style podcasts, mostly recycling the same guests. So why is this one worth a listen? Well, first of all, it's the caliber of guests. This podcast has got some seriously big names, and it was getting them from really early on in its life. It hasn't been going all that long, so I don't know how Chris, the host, has done it. But the other reason for listening is Chris himself, because as an interviewer, he's not just asking questions, he's also adding loads of value from his own observations and bringing in lessons that he's learned from previous guests on the show. He just does such a good job as an interviewer in making these conversations as good as they can possibly be. He's also a successful business person in his own right, and he's also, annoyingly, so good looking, he was even on the first series of Love Island. It's all quite irritating, really, but it is a fantastic podcast.
Which is more difficult, the selection process for Special Forces or climbing Everest twice?
I'd have to say climbing Everest. Selection, 6 months, a selection just seems to, it's drawn out over 6 months, right? And when you start, you're already a seasoned soldier. Like for me, I've done 1 tour of Iraq and 2 tours of Afghanistan. So you almost get to that stage where you want to prove yourself as a soldier. And I was, 24 years old, like full of testosterone. So like you go on selection with a bunch of other lads and you're all, you've got this unified kind of cause that you're all going for at the same time. And I actually enjoyed selection.
And the last podcast on the list is the cycling podcast. So cycling for me is a sport that I absolutely love to watch. It's probably, for me, the most underrated sport out there. I try and put as many people onto it as possible. I don't really cycle, not road racing anyway. I've got a mountain bike and I get out on it occasionally, but I'm far from a professional and I'm far from an enthusiast for road cycling. Although I love the sport. The tactics behind it, the dynamics, the drama, the politics. There's so much that goes on within the peloton. And each year I watch the Grand Tours that are on the TV, but I back this up with the cycling podcast. Now, I'm not recommending it because I enjoy cycling. I'm recommending it because it is such a strong podcast in its own right. The presenters on it are absolutely top notch. They are top of their field in what they do. They are a really, really impressive team of podcasters and journalists. And it makes what for me is already an enjoyable subject really enjoyable. They are funny as well. I'll find myself on a walk and then just laughing out loud, hopefully with nobody in too close proximity because they'll think I'm weird. But it doesn't bother me because I am really enjoying myself. If you've got even the slightest interest in cycling, check this one out.
They obviously weren't playing as a team there.
The trouble is, though, it needed 2 or 3 strong riders to try and bring back Van Vleuten. I mean, Van der Breggen on her own wasn't making any impact. If one of the CCC riders, Voss or Moulin-Passy, had gone to the front to chase, would they not have just been left to do that by the other teams? I mean, who would have helped them? And what would have been the point? Because the chances of bringing back Van Vleuten, I mean, they seem to know behind that they weren't going to bring her back, and so there was a sort of sense of resignation in that chasing group. It looked like
they were fighting for the podium reasonably early on.
All right, so that was podcasts. Now moving on to a category that we've probably had the fewest recommendations for in previous years, but this year that is not the case. We've got absolutely loads, and that category is TV and YouTube. So anything you might want to watch. I have only got one actual proper TV recommendation this year, but it's a strong one. It's Succession.
Love it. Brilliant program, brilliant TV series.
In fact, Rob, you deserve the credit for this recommendation because we both started watching it independently. I gave up on it really early on after I think about the first 3 episodes. And then you were talking about how much you enjoyed it and you encouraged me to give it another try. So I did, and wow, it's been so worth it. No spoilers, please, because at the time of this recording, I still haven't actually finished it. I'm midway through the 2nd season, but it is so good. It's basically the story of the head of a massive media company and his children, and it's about the battle between his children to one day take over from him because he's old and not in very good health. But that completely undersells it. It's so dramatic. The writing is so good. It's really funny in places, and it just leaves you thinking about it for such a long time after each episode, which for me is the mark of something. It's not just a bit of fleeting entertainment, but a really great piece of art, I suppose. I know it's really popular, so you may well have watched it already, but if you haven't, then go do it.
Yeah, so I absolutely endorse that choice. Brilliant show. I've got 2 additional TV shows to recommend. One, again, popular, and one probably not so known. Both are on Netflix. The first is called The Last Dance, and it follows Michael Jordan's last season for the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan is debated, but is possibly the greatest basketball player of all time. And he didn't get there by talent alone. It's an incredible story. It doesn't just tell a story of that season, but also his life leading up to that season, and also the backstory of some of the players involved in those teams as well. It's so well put together, and following the story of a guy who obviously I was familiar with but didn't know a lot about. He's a complex character in himself, and you would expect that for someone who's reached the very top. You know, the people who reach the very top are not perfect humans. Often they come with extremes, and he definitely has his extremes. It's a brilliant series. I'd highly recommend it if you missed it this year. I know a lot of people watch that alongside The Tiger King, but don't worry, that's not my other recommendation. But The Last Dance certainly is. Another TV show that I've not really heard too many people talk about, but I really enjoyed, so I wanted to bring it to your attention, is another show on Netflix called Messiah. And I don't want to give too much away with this, but it's a fascinating TV series. It's about a person who may or may not be a new messiah. Now, that in itself sounds quite interesting. Someone in the modern day claiming to be a messiah and doing things that may have people believing that's the case. But for me, what is even more interesting and what they've done so well is the stories of the people influenced or against this messiah and how certain people are clinging to things because they need more in their own lives, but they haven't recognized it yet. And the people rejecting this Messiah and their reasons for doing so. It really gets into the depth of some of these characters in a really powerful way. And I really enjoyed this series. So I'm going to recommend it. I know these type of subjects can put people off, so it's a bit of a risk recommending it. If you've got very strong beliefs on this subject and you're going to be easily offended, then maybe not watch it. But if you're open-minded and you want to watch something interesting, then I'd add it to your list.
So that was TV, but I found myself watching a lot more YouTube this year. And Rob, I know you have as well. In fact, you have been in previous years, but it's only really been this year for me that I've started spending a lot of time on YouTube. And I've picked up a few interesting things. The first channel is called The Cycling GK. That's the cycling goalkeeper. And it's a vlog by the Watford goalkeeper, Ben Foster. Now, I'm not recommending this because I am technically a Watford fan. I used to be a big fan. These days, I don't pay any attention to football whatsoever. But if you do have even the tiniest little bit of interest in football, or indeed in cycling, because as the channel name suggests, that's something he's really into and talks about a lot as well, it's just so good because you get such a brilliant insight into what goes on behind the scenes of a somewhat successful, sometimes, football club. And Ben is just such a nice guy. He's so positive and he's such an engaging presence. I think if he wanted to, he could have a really great TV career after he retires. It's the kind of watch that leaves you coming away feeling better every time because he's just such an upbeat person and seems to have so much fun all the time. So for me, Rob, this is a really good example of what's so good about YouTube. Anyone can start a channel on any subject, and often it gives you access into worlds that you knew nothing about.
Yeah, the YouTube algorithm is incredible. That in its own could be the hub extra. Just start using YouTube and let it find out about you and who you are and what you're interested in, because the type of channels that it starts feeding you are probably things that you possibly not even start searching for. I'm going to group a few niche channels together just to give you an idea. So if any of these subjects interest you, then go and check them out. But there are some great YouTubers out there who are tackling niche topics and doing a great job. Last year I mentioned Aquaholic, which is a guy who goes on different boats and of all sizes and budgets, and that's really, really interesting. I don't know why. I get a bit seasick and I don't intend on buying a boat, but I just really enjoy looking around them. There's the Points Guy UK who travels on planes. Again, I'm not a massive fan of flying, but I just like them going in different classes and rating the economy classes against different airlines and then the business class against different airlines. But they do it in such an entertaining way. You've got Mickey Views. Yeah, I'm a massive Disney fan. And this guy just goes around Disney and gives you updates on the park. But I really enjoy it. And Gotham Chess. I've really gotten into my chess this year. And there are loads of chess channels, it turns out. But this guy in particular does a great job. He manages to combine education and entertainment in one, and I really enjoy his videos. So the YouTube algorithm is serving me up all sorts of stuff at the moment, and that just gives you an idea of the stuff it serves me and how dull I am. But once you start using YouTube, it will give you so many different options, and there's so much good stuff out there that you don't even need to look for because YouTube will do it for you.
You know, in the old days, if you're getting to know someone, you went around their house for the first time, you'd always go and look at their bookshelf to see what they're reading and like get some idea about their interests and what they were like as a person. I think the YouTube algorithm is that now. That you can tell so much about someone from what YouTube is recommending that they watch that day. But frankly, what it says about us both is probably quite worrying.
Yeah, and I probably shouldn't mention that I get loads of stuff on about trains as well. So just to really enforce the dullness. But yeah, I enjoy it. And you know what? When I look at all these channels, most of them have got over 100,000 subscribers. So it's nice not feeling alone with my niche interests.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly cute puppies and dogs emotionally greeting their owners when they get back from military service and stuff like that. How YouTube knows like this kind of thing, I don't know. But
I get them as well.
But among all the puppies, there's also other things I've been enjoying this year that's got a bit more substance to it. Someone who is absolutely blown up beyond all belief this year, deservedly so, is Ali Abdaal. He's someone who probably in the first quarter of this year, I started hearing mentioned occasionally. I went to check out his videos. And by now, the end of the year, he is everywhere. His channel is so much bigger. He's now networking with the biggest people in the space. He's being interviewed on every podcast going, being held up as this like gold standard of what's possible on YouTube. It's incredible how far he's come, and rightly so, because his content is so good. So the background is he was a medical student at Cambridge who would put up vlog style videos about his life and how he studied for exams and things like that. Then he started going into reviewing iPads and did a lot of that and picked up followers that way. And now he's broadened out into all kinds of productivity tips and things things like that. But everything he does, he's got such a great, clear way of explaining whatever it is that he's talking about. He puts the ideas across so well. He does it so concisely. He doesn't waste any time by doing long, rambling intros. He gives you the most important stuff up front. And it's really nice to see that he's been rewarded for that. He's clearly been rewarded by the YouTube algorithm, and other people in the space have noticed as well and appreciate what he's doing. So if you've got any interest in productivity, technology, self-improvement, things like that, check out his channel.
Yeah, I also subscribe and also get fed his videos by the wonderful YouTube algorithm. And I've seen he's gone through 1 million subscribers. So it's absolutely bonkers because, like you said, Rob, maybe a year ago, he was nowhere near that number. He's absolutely blown up this year. Another channel that we've mentioned before, but I want to mention again because they're doing something a bit different with the same subject now, is the YouTube channel called Mike Winnett by Mike Winnett. And they have exposed entrepreneurs in the past. And entrepreneur is someone who pretends to be an entrepreneur but sells you an expensive course, which tells you how they've been incredibly successful. And you can also do it in a short amount of time if you hand some cash over to them. Now, you'd think by that description that many people wouldn't fall for that, but actually these guys are incredible at what they do. Their sales and marketing is top notch, and they seem to find it quite easy to get people to part with their cash. And that's because really there's a formula behind what they do, and when it's broken down, which Mike does, he shows you that actually they just tend to do the same things over and over again. So why am I recommending it again this year? Well, because what they're doing now is they've started something called Entrepreneur Bingo. And Entrepreneur Bingo goes out every single Friday around 4 p.m. And what they do is they listen to a product pitch by one of these entrepreneurs and cross off the things that they all do, because they all do the same things: products ending in a 7, bonus stacks, and much more. Now, my description probably doesn't get you infused to run over and watch, but I promise you, it's hilarious. I've spent a lot of Fridays waiting for their video at 5 p.m, cracking open a beer and kicking off my weekend with one of these videos, which are normally less than 10 minutes long. They're hilarious. They put you in a great place, great entertainment. Their subscribers are going up as well, and I'm not surprised because the quality of the stuff Mike and his team are putting out is absolutely brilliant. So go and check that out. Entrepreneur Bingo from Mike Winnett every Friday. Hilarious to watch.
It is so good. Strongly back that recommendation. I've got another one which is not as good, but it's in a similar vein. It's a channel called CoffeeZilla, which is a weird name, but it's an American guy who's doing a similar kind of thing to Mike in that he's trying to expose scammers online. And because he's American and he's coming at it from a bit of a different angle, he tends to get into different territory from Mike and look into other industries. But it's amazing the commonalities that they've all got. Everyone seems to be copying from the same playbook. So don't get me wrong, he's no Mike Winnett, but it's still very funny and a little bit scary to see how much is going on and how many people are falling for it. So worth watching for entertainment and to make sure that you or anyone else in your life doesn't fall for one of the scams they're talking about.
So, as we said, we had a lot to offer there through TV, but mainly YouTube. YouTube has been a big channel for us this year. But we always bring you our favourite tech or apps that we've interacted with as well. And this year, we've got some crackers. I'm going to kick us off and I'm going to keep that meditation theme going and recommend Insight Timer. Insight Timer, for me, is like the Google of meditation. You go in and you can search for meditations of different lengths, different themes, guided, unguided, male voices, female voices, pretty much wherever you want, you can search for it and it will deliver. It's also got them rated as well, so you can make sure you're not wasting your time with a rubbish meditation. It's a great app. If you are not into meditation, give it a try, please. The amount of people I hear say, oh, I can't meditate. All you need to do is commit to 10 minutes and just do it. And even if it doesn't go well, just promise that you'll stick it out for the whole 10 minutes, because I can tell you the internal dialogue of pretty much every time I meditate. Oh, it's not happening. Yeah, I knew this wouldn't work. I'm too wired. It's not going to work. Wait a minute. Oh, okay. It's starting to work. Oh, I'm feeling better. Oh, I'm glad I saw that through. That is pretty much every single meditation that I do. So I promise you, even if you're not someone who finds meditation easy, I don't. Give it a go, because it is like having, I said to Rob the other day, it's like having a shower on the inside, a good meditation. It really does make a difference. So check this app out. It's completely free. Why not give it a go?
The app that I'm going to recommend this year is could really be any flashcard app. The one that I use is a popular one that's free called Anki, A-N-K-I, but it's just the concept of using flashcards with something called spaced repetition. So basically, it's a method of learning where you'll see the definition on the front of the card, then you flip it over to see if you've remembered the answer or not, then you rate it depending on whether you got it right or wrong and how easy it was. And based on that, it has an algorithm that determines when you see that card again. So if you find it really easy, you won't see it for a long time. If you found it hard, you might see it again the same day or see it tomorrow. And something about that system just makes information go in and makes it stick with you in a way that nothing has for me before. And the cool thing about Anki, and I'm sure others do this as well, is that there are pre-made decks by people in the community that you can download and just start working through rather than creating the cards yourself. So I've got one for general trivia and I've got another one for geography because my geography is absolutely terrible. And I just go through those for a few minutes every day. And you know what? It's starting to go in. Don't test me on my world capitals now, but this time next year, maybe I'll be all right.
Now, we've given you a lot to work through so far, so you might feel a little bit fatigued or tired. Well, don't worry, I've got an app for you. It's called Fizz, spelt P-Z-I-Z-Z. And it's an app that can help you take a power nap. For me, like many of us, I'm packing a lot into each and every day. And by having that little power nap, often after lunch or if I'm working into the evening, late afternoon, to just keep me going, is incredible. Until you start doing it, I don't think you realise how much of a difference it will make. It's like having the strongest coffee possible. It's well worth that investment of the 15-20 minutes downtime because the amount of work you end up doing afterwards will get you that time back and so much more. So check it out. Again, it's completely free to use. It's an absolutely brilliant app and one that I find really useful and beneficial.
Love a good power nap. Do that all the time. Now, this is a category called apps and tech. And so I've got a general piece of tech to recommend. It does feel a bit like I'm recommending the microwave or something because I'm so far behind on this. Everyone's been doing it for years. But wireless headphones. Now, I know AirPods have been a thing for a couple of years. I don't actually have AirPods yet, but I got a wireless headset for doing Zoom calls and things like that, which of course everyone's been doing a lot of this year. And it sounds so stupid, but the difference between having a wired versus a wireless headset has just been massive because it means I can pace. And this changes everything because I'm a massive pacer when I'm on the phone and it really does help me think and focus. So just being free to be able to wander around has been a game changer. It sounds ridiculous, but must have cost about 30 quid and it's actually changed what so much of my day is like because I spend so much of my day on calls. So you're probably way ahead of me. But if you haven't cut the cord yet for those Zoom calls, strongly recommend it.
And I do strongly recommend that you consider the AirPods as well, Rob, because I find them absolutely brilliant. Like yourself, I'm a pacer when I'm on a phone call or on a lot of Zoom meetings as well. I turn my camera off and start walking. And it helps me in those meetings and I do better work. The AirPods are great. The battery life is fantastic. They charge really, really quickly. And if you've got multiple Apple devices, they've recently updated the software where it seems to just know that you're moving device and it jumps between them. It's just really, really clever, so you don't have to manually tell it, right, I'm using this device now. So if you haven't finished your Christmas list yet, Rob, maybe add Apple AirPods and Father Christmas might be nice to you. And last on the list, just to make sure if any part of you didn't realise that I'm a geek, I'll make sure I cement that right now with my last recommendation, which is chess.com. So this year, I've found that I've really got into my chess. I've always had a passing interest, but I've never really spent time to learn the subject. I've just decided to pick it up myself and do what makes sense, and I've done okay. But this year, I don't know why, what the trigger was, possibly because my son plays at school and he was starting to beat me. That is almost certainly the reason. I wanted to improve my chess, and I have. And chess.com, again, is absolutely free to use. It's absolutely brilliant. You can play just game after game really, really quickly. 5-minute games, 10-minute games. I've even got down to 1-minute games to help me make my moves quicker and think faster. It's really, really good. There's also a chess academy or school on there where you can learn more. And it's really got me into those YouTube videos, which I've mentioned earlier, to help me up my game and understand the theory behind it. I love chess. I love the mental stimulation it gives me, that you're not just thinking about your next move, but your next 4 or 5 moves. It's absolutely brilliant for making your brain work and putting it to good use. So if you've ever had a passing interest in chess but not really taken it up, give chess.com a go. Download the app. I use it on my iPad. You can use it on your desktop or your iPhone as well. And I'm sure you'll up your game and your enjoyment for what is an absolutely brilliant game.
Well, there you go. Those were our recommendations for 2020. As ever, when we started putting this list together, I was like, I don't know, has there been much this year? But then by the time you think through, there's been absolutely loads. So hopefully there's been one or two things on there that's caught your attention, either something for you to read or listen to or watch, or something to put someone else's way for Christmas. Or if nothing else, at least you've got an insight into our very weird and boring lives.
So we're giving you more than enough there to keep you occupied. And of course, we'll be back next Thursday with the Property Podcast, which has no breaks. That machine will continue week in, week out. So until then, take care, everyone. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.